I'm currently a little bit in a reading slump. It's actually a really bad one. So I thought instead of talking about books I have read recently, I'm going to talk about books I didn't finish. I actually tend to finish books because I'm a very stubborn person, and if I start a book, I'm determined to finish it, whether or not I enjoy it. Sometimes that was a good thing because I ended up loving the book in spite of how I felt in the beginning. Sometimes I really didn't and I wish I would have DNF'd them. But nonetheless, there are some I have actually stopped reading because they were not really my kind of story, or they were different than I thought they would be, or I don't know, I just didn't vibe with it, and it was very much a right book, wrong moment situation. So I thought I'd talk about the four most recent books I have DNF'd. Since I am not at home and don't have all of my books with me, I only have one physical book with me I have DNF'd. For the others I will insert a picture somewhere. Yeah, but we're going to start with that one because that is the most recent one. It's Jerry by Nicole Walker, and it's about this couple who have serious drug issues and want to rob a bank for their own personal gain. There is a TV show about it, I haven't watched it. I don't usually do that because I don't know, I want to read books that sound interesting and not like, oh, pretty cover, I have to have it. But this has a really neat cover. It's like stars, but I don't know if you can see it, but if you look at it in the right angle, there's a skull on it, and that kind of looked neat. So I was like, okay, how bad can it be? I didn't really get far into the book. I think only like 2 or 3 chapters, and I've realized that it's not really my thing. It primarily talked about these two people trying to get high on illegal substances, and that the writing style very much reminded me of Charles Bukowski. I tried to like Bukowski for a very long time. And then I read Post Office and I didn't anymore. I didn't enjoy the book, and I don't know, I decided not to pick up any more of his works because of that. But if you do like Bukowski and his writing style, I think this would be for you because, as I said, it's very similar to how Bukowski writes. Very, very dry, very matter-of-factly. It's just very openly describing your everyday life. Well, if you're a drug addict, I guess. So maybe not everyday life for every person, but I think you know what I mean. So as I haven't finished it or haven't read enough to give like a thorough review on it, this is as much as I can say about it. But I primarily stopped reading it because of the writing style, because I've just realized that it's not my thing. I didn't really vibe with it, and I also realized that on the blurb the story sounded more exciting than it was in the end for me. But again, I've only read the first few chapters. So if you have read it, or if you're going to pick it up, maybe you can tell me if it's any good after all, and maybe I will continue it. I mean, maybe I will continue it like somewhere in the future. Maybe I'm just not in the right state of mind to read something like that right now, and I think that's okay. But yeah, that's the first one I DNF'd. The next one is Rebecca, which I actually had to read for university. And the thing is, I really enjoyed this book. As much as I've read of it, I do know the ending because we've talked about it in class, and I have read like snippets from throughout the entire book, so I'm like very well educated on the story. I have also seen the film on Netflix. I really do want to see the Alfred Hitchcock version. The reason why I DNF'd it is probably because I have read it for university. I really don't know how to explain this, but like, I annotate a lot, and I eventually spent much more time annotating, and it took me like hours to read one chapter because I found like anything I could analyze for a paper, and eventually that just like trained on me, I guess. But I really do want to like read it when I have like free time and can like read it for the book it is. And Rebecca essentially is about a young woman whose name you actually never know, who goes on this holiday in Monte Cristo, I think it is, with, I forgot what she was called, but she's essentially paid to be the friend of this elderly lady, and they go on a holiday together, and she's supposed to like keep her company and, you know, go on like dinners and soirees with her and all of that. And on this holiday they meet Maxime de Winter, who is recently widowed, and the girl is immediately smitten by him, and she feels like a really deep connection. And then the woman who pays her to be her friend is ill, and they spend a lot of time together. They go on drives on the hillside of the country. They go on picnics and just do like cute things together. And then when the woman wants to leave for New York, like they want to go to Paris, and then she wants to get a ship to New York, De Winter is proposing. She says yes, they marry, and then she goes with him to his estate, Mendeley is called. When she's there, however, everywhere she goes, she is reminded of his late wife, Rebecca, who's still all present, and everyone is always comparing her to Rebecca, who's a great hostess, who was amazing and sweet and kind and a wonderful wife, and they loved each other so much, and he's forever remembering her, and no one will ever come close to Rebecca. And she feels kind of threatened by this ghost of his past, and she wants to do everything she can to make sure that she's better than Rebecca, that he will love her even more than he did Rebecca, and that leads to a lot of complications and fights in their marriage. And also he's kind of referring to her like you would to a child, like he calls her a silly girl. And there's this one scene where they have like a masquerade ball, and he's like, "Ghost Alice in Wonderland, you look like her already," because she looks very young. And I mean, I have read that for a class who talks about, you know, gender and masculinity and femininity, so we've talked about all the way that Maxime de Winter is actually like patronizing her, and she's just doing it, and she's doing everything she can to please him without actually taking care of herself. So that's actually an entire theme in the story. She's mostly living through him and through the men in her life. It's also like becoming present because you never know her name. You only know her as Mrs. de Winter, so she's defined by her husband's last name, while Rebecca defines herself very strongly through her first name, through her own identity. And the only clue you have about the girl's name is that her father gave it to her, which again is like a male figure in her life that was very important, so she's very much driven to please the men in her life and is very close to the men in her life. But, well, the plot twist in the end is actually really good, and I would highly recommend reading that book because it is actually really great. It's also really well written. That was probably one of these moments where it's like, right book, wrong time, and I will definitely pick it up again. The next book is The Power by Naomi Alderman, and that book essentially is about, it's a sci-fi book about women having this gene that gives them power of electricity. Like, it's in their hands somewhere. I can't really remember how it was explained, but whenever they touch something, they like electrify it, and that turns them into great threats for men. And eventually women and men are separated because of that, so girls wouldn't hurt the guys anymore in schools and workplaces and such. And this led to like two different groups. There was one girl coming from a very unloving home. I don't really want to go into that much detail about it because it can be very triggering. So definitely check out the trigger warnings for that book. Deals with a lot of traumatic experiences. Anyway, the girl runs away and she finds sanctuary with nuns and a lot of other girls who have the same powers out there, and the girl wants to use her powers to then make the girls feel safe and make them able to control them and to create a safe haven for every girl, like a peaceful environment. And she kind of becomes the leader, and she has this voice in her head that tells her what to do and how to do it and where to go. So she's like guided by this voice talking to her, and she calls herself Mother Eve, as like an allusion to the Virgin Mary and Eve from the Bible. She's like these two people in one, which are seen as, you know, the purest of the women and the sinner, like the original sinner, because Eve ate the forbidden fruit and all of that. I think you're familiar with that. Anyway, she like leads this very safe space, and then on the other side, we have a woman who uses this power to suppress men, and it was very much like gender reversal on patriarchy and toxic masculinity, and it very much was like, what if the women would treat men the way men treat women in our society? And that led so far that men were not allowed to have their own income, they were not allowed to get their own money, they were not even allowed to leave the country without a woman or female guardian allowing them to. They were very much imprisoned in this state, and as I said, it very much was like gender reverse on how women were treated for a very, very long time. Luckily, it got better with like evolvement and the feminism movement. We still have a long way to go, especially considering that there's still a lot of countries where women are oppressed, where people in general are oppressed for how they feel, for their sexuality, for their gender identity, for their gender. And yeah, I think reading that book really made you realize how ridiculous it all is to define somebody that badly by gender and the body they're born in, essentially. So I really much liked the message behind it. But I'm not the biggest fan of sci-fi books, which led for me to eventually DNF it, because it wasn't my style, I guess. But as I said, I think if you like science fiction and if you want to talk about feminism and gender identity, I think this book is really, really great because it really touches on this. But it also shows like how two extremes can go. Like on the one side we have this very semi-peaceful place where women can just be themselves and be free and use this great power they have. And on the other side we have this extreme oppression and the abuse of the power from the women. And I think it's just very interesting to see these sides reflected, because both sides are possible. Like there are two ways to deal with having superior power, and I think it's very interesting to see how the two sides interact with it. And it's also written from like multiple perspectives of people affected, and there's also like a male voice in all of this who is a journalist and talks about the entire situation and tries to make a story out of it, and how he feels about the women having this power. So it's very much like a variety of voices you hear who are essentially affected by this great power. So I would again recommend it, but for me personally, as somebody who doesn't really enjoy sci-fi, it was the writing style that just like drained me, and eventually there were like very long times where I just didn't pick up the book to read it. So I decided that it might just be better to DNF it than to like try to continue reading it. The last book I want to mention is Much Ado About Nothing by William Shakespeare. And this might be a controversial opinion, I don't know, but I am actually not a fan of Shakespeare at all. I try to be, because I think like when you're in the book community or when you're reading, everyone is always like praising certain authors, and not liking classics makes you feel stupid or something, and there's this entire peer pressure to like Shakespeare just because it's Shakespeare and he's a genius and a grand writer and he shaped our literature and all of this. I've read Romeo and Juliet, I've read Hamlet, I've read Midsummer Night's Dream, which is not a lot of his book because he wrote a lot of things, but it's as much as I could take. And then I read Much Ado About Nothing, and I just couldn't. I didn't like the plot that much. I thought it was very boring. I didn't like the writing style. It wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy it. And I do like some of Shakespeare's sonnets. I think his poems are really good, but I don't like his plays. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's just, it feels like it's supposed to sound so sophisticated and so intellectual that eventually just drains on you, and you're like, yeah, I don't care. I don't know. It's, I can't really describe it. I couldn't actually explain to you what Much Ado About Nothing is actually about. I know it's about like an enemies to lovers story, and I remember like the two main characters having this entire like fight or like intellectual, I don't know, rap-off. Can you call it that? I don't know, where they just like go back and forth and be like, oh, I'm smarter than you are, but no, I'm smarter than you are. And I remember there's a police who do something, but that's literally all I could remember because I've read it and I was like, I didn't care that much. And so I decided to just not continue reading it, and I decided that William Shakespeare just is not for me. I'm just not a fan of Shakespeare, and I think that's okay. And I think I'm not the only one who doesn't enjoy his works, or at least his plays. Funnily enough, I really do want to read Macbeth though, because I don't know, that sounds like something I would enjoy, but I'm not sure if I would enjoy Shakespeare's Macbeth, if that makes sense. I think if somebody else would have written it, I would have been more prone to picking it up. But maybe it's also because I'm more of like a novel reader. I prefer reading novels over plays. So maybe that's adding to it. I think it's just like a summary of all of these things. But yeah, that's one of the books I DNF'd, and probably also the last Shakespeare book I'll ever pick up. So these were some of the books I have, well, these are 4 of the books I have DNF'd recently. While actually like doing research for this video, I mean, research. I just looked up which books I actually did DNF because I have a terrible memory, and funnily enough I can remember like plots from books I've read years ago, but I can't remember what I had for breakfast 3 days ago. So yeah, sometimes I just have to. I just went through my Storygraph profile to look up what books I have DNF'd, and these were the books that came up. I also saw some other books I DNF'd, so maybe I'll do a part 2, but I felt like 4 was a good number of books to discuss in one video, so I could try to go as deep into them as I possibly can with not having read them fully. So these were 4 of the books I have DNF'd recently. I think it's weird that you say you have DNF'd, because do you say that like that? I always hear people say it, but technically you should just say I DNF, because it means they're not. I'm sorry. I'm studying linguistics right now, so I kind of question everything we say. I'm like, is that really how we say it? If you do say I DNF'd, I'm truly sorry for have said it wrong through the entire video. I kind of thought you say have DNF'd, and it never really made sense to me. Anyway, these are the books I didn't finish recently. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if you've read any of the books, you can tell me in the comments if you like them or if you didn't like them, and why you didn't or why you did like them. If you think one of the books I've talked about sounds interesting or something like you would like to read. You can also leave your thoughts in the comments after you read them, or tell me what exactly you found interesting about them before you pick them up. I would really appreciate that. We can have like a little conversation about books you may be DNF'd and why. So yeah, you can also subscribe to my channel if you want to, and I hope I see you in my next video.